Last week I recorded a story called An Empty Prison, and I'm happy to say it was incredibly popular with all of you. Tonight's story is not a direct sequel to that, but spiritually, it's a really nice follow-on. So if you enjoyed that story, I'm sure you're going to love this one. If you haven't listened to it yet, well, I guess you've got some more listening to do this evening after this one. Now, my dear friends, you know what time it is. It's Friday evening, so sit back and relax with your favorite drink and listen. First entry. They took me while I was sleeping, which was something, I must admit, I hadn't taken into consideration. As far as I knew, my location was secure. With this, I'd taken distinct precautions. But they seemed to have been all for nothing. I took a silent pride in being the center of a media circus, displayed on every screen and billboard. There was no newspaper printed that didn't bear some bloody pseudonym assumed for me, and no one left their homes without the stories of the things I'd done playing about their heads. Of course, it was all unnecessary. I was not a bad man, though, I must admit, taking some liberties with the definition of a bad man. People believed they were being stalked by me, when, in reality, they were only living alongside me. This is a point I must stress. I never stalked anyone. I wouldn't take myself to such lows. I was indiscriminate, and perhaps that was the reason why I was so feared. People felt as if they were being stalked because being paranoid was the only safe thing to do. And I can't begin to describe how right they were. I suppose if there was one thing that connected my victims, it was that none of them were mindful of my presence. The first, I can't hold at fault. I was, after all, an unknown. A simple man, working a simple job and driving a simple car. Who would take that as a sign of anything suspicious? Certainly not me. And I was the one up to no good. He wasn't a very strong man. Scrawny, not an ounce in weight, and all too easy to overpower. I'd taken him by surprise, for no better reason than a sudden urge to do so. He didn't fight very hard, but then again, how could he? Before he even knew what was going on, I'd cracked his head against the wall, and in his confusion I'd taken him to the ground. Then, using the weapons nature provided, finished him off. Oh, he was a terrible sight to see after I'd finished. Weak bones shattered and fair skin pierced. I had to take that in, what I'd done. I forgot about that simple job and that simple car, and the simple man I was simply vanished, draining away in a clotted pool of blood and dirt. I'd stared at the lad, taken in his features, everything about that scene. It all stuck and clung, a miasma of filth that polluted my brain, though I didn't want it gone. I felt as if my simplicity was a lie, and this young man before me was a symbol of truth. I only killed twice more after him. Another man completely different to the first in all aspects, different race, class, and so on. And a woman, though I don't remember much about the second man. Perhaps it was this, and the mere compulsion, that drove me to murder, that got me thrown in here. I'd found the woman on the street one night. She'd had too much to drink and was vomiting into a bush. Her friends, who saw her in this state, laughed and walked back to their party. I then did something I'd never done before. which was to hold back her hair. Makes me sound quite the gentleman, doesn't it? There was something about its faint softness, however, that awoke in me again that simple urge. It was in much the same fashion as the first that I disposed of her, knocking her to the ground and allowing my fists to send her on. She didn't thrill me as much as the first. She flailed too much, and I found that irritating. I'd left her there, not bothering to observe the scene. I didn't kill again, and it was during this period that the police hunted for me relentlessly, and news of a murderer was broadcast. It wasn't a conscious decision to lay low at first, but when the urges took me again, I forced myself to repress them, fearing that another murder would provide the police what clues they needed to find me. These urges soon became increasingly frequent, and I was on the verge of giving in when I was taken. I was not given a trial, or at least I was given one I wasn't present for, or perhaps one that I'd erased from memory. Either way, dwelling upon it won't do me any good in here. I was told later that the trial had ended with my being found guilty, but mentally ill, and I would be spending my sentence in a secure psychiatric facility. Sounded a damn sight more interesting than prison. I arrived wrapped in a white straitjacket, and was hauled into the building by two young men with more muscles than brains. They were barely self-aware enough to be kept from being thrown in here with me. At first, I noticed two expressions commonly carried through those halls. Dumbfoundedness was the first one, a result, I assume, of the medication, though indifference was the main one. Indifference is carried by the staff. A blank expression with the eyes held somewhere above the head, so as to avoid contact. This look came my way quite often. However, I knew that would fade. The doctors would soon have other things to worry themselves about than me. As for the patients, well, they would tend to be dumbfounded somewhere else. A third, scrawnier man then led us through the wards of slow inmates until we came to where they kept the distinctly more interesting people. Oh, how I would have loved to sit and speak deeply with just one of those inmates. It excited me to think that behind each one of those locked doors was a man with as much to say as myself. Though, I suppose it's logical to keep us separate. If they say a prison is a college of crime, then I can only imagine what they must say about an asylum. I was escorted to my ward, if that's the correct word for it. A simple, iron-wrought bed set in one corner of 4 white walls, and an equally simple bedside table. Next came a long lecture from the scrawnier man with regards to my situation and treatment, detailing the events which led me here with a disdainfully bored expression, an almost misted-over look to his eyes. To be honest, I remember myself snapping, I know exactly why I'm in here, and what you're going to do to cure me. So you may as well fuck off and leave me alone. I was expecting this to take him by surprise, hoping for him to become a flustered mess. Instead, he stared at me impassively, scribbled a few notes on a clipboard, and waited for me to sit down. Our chief medical officer believes that in cases like yours, therapeutic writing, along with a series of medications, can provide satisfying results. He mumbled, and placed the cheap notebook in which I now write on the bed. He then got up and left me in peace. For the first few days, I only used this journal for simple doodling. It was taken from me each night and returned to me in the morning, usually hand-delivered by a pretty young nurse. She alone is kind. A welcoming grace, I'd say. She looks me in the eyes and she smiles, which, alone, is an experience I haven't felt since, well, a long time ago. I find myself anticipating her arrival. Each morning I take my pills calmly and we chat. The subjects vary from the vague to, well, what I consider to be quite personal. I know she lives with her family not far from here. Where exactly she wouldn't say, and that this is her first real job. Other than that, I have no factual details about her, though she certainly has a better bedside manner than most of the dim staff I'm forced to deal with. No matter. My nurse tends to me. Second entry. Today, I was allowed to visit our very humble library. It appears that the good doctor also believes in therapeutic reading, which is apparent at a glance. I spent all afternoon stalking the bookshelves and came out with nothing more exciting than a book on the care of exotic carp. I failed to see the good doctor's logic. He lets a man as exciting as myself write down every fleeting thought, and yet the books in his library are as exciting as watching an old woman knit. This place gives me a headache. I may as well just reread my journal. I find I can be an incredibly interesting person when there's nothing better to hand. I was then quite surprised by a visit from the good doctor himself. It was the second time I'd actually laid eyes on the man, and, having not been prepared for his sudden arrival, I gawked at him and, without meaning to, made it look as though I belonged in here. He then formally sat on my bed and laid a slim folder next to him. He had a kind face. That was something I hadn't observed before. Rather boyish in its way, with the slightest hint of a smile ever present. He shuffled through a few papers and then he told me how happy he was. Allegedly, I was what he referred to as a model patient. I was spoken of with high regards by my nurse, and the staff who had the good fortune of meeting me were impressed, albeit somewhat surprised, by my cooperation. He then requested to look over my journal, though I could tell this was for show. The ums and ahs, attempting to hide a rather poor display of a man pretending to read. Of course, he'd seen its content before. There was no real need to appear to read it in front of me, except for to comment on how little I've written and how he'd like me to do it more often. There was then some talk about my medication, as there generally is whenever doctors are involved, and then he left with a courteous handshake. I was visited again by my nurse, who seemed to go prettier with each passing night. She carried with her a usual tray, along with its assortment of pills, including 2 newer, harder-to-swallow ones. We then got to our usual chatting, which lasted until she realized there was somewhere, as she put it, not better, but where she was needed more. Then she too curtly left me to my own devices. Third entry. Unbelievable. Apparently my dear young nurse is not as attentive as she made out. Or maybe it is the hospital itself that refuses to let her see me. The day after my last entry, I was awoken by some fat gorilla of a woman who ripped the sheets from my bed and forced me into a lukewarm bath, where I was scrubbed down like a filthy dog. Where is my nurse? My own voice was a whimper, a surprisingly pathetic side effect, I presume, of her presence. I'm your nurse now. Quit your whimpering. She spoke in a grunt, befitting of her piggy face. The hulking wench dragged me back to my cell, and there I was left without so much as a sympathetic word. For a while, I just stared at the door. The memory of her touch made me cringe and retch. Who was this woman? And why was she bathing me? I'd never had to be bathed in my entire time here. I was always cooperative. Why did it feel like punishment? And the question that burned itself most in my mind, where was my nurse? Perhaps the fat pig ate her. I remember thinking and laughing at myself, but not in malice. No, I felt some kind of childish glee. The thought of a giant pig in a nurse's uniform made me cackle, made me cry until my lungs burned through lack of breath and my ribs ached. My childish glee, I'm sad to say, was brutally interrupted by a spiteful adult realization. This was something I shouldn't find funny. Comical, perhaps, but not, on my knees gasping through bursts of cackling funny. Had I perhaps regressed, retained a child's sense of humor? Not being a psychological expert, I could only presume that lack of worthwhile stimulation could take a toll on my mental well-being. I heard the fat nurse's voice from behind my door, complaining to some mumbled voice about bringing me my medicine. Once again, realization dawned upon me. Why would I, a perfectly healthy man, require medicating? The only possibility had to be that it was to addle the brain, stir what they believed an unfocused mass of thoughts and radical emotions into something more controllable, ultimately simpler. But my mind had focus. They had nearly robbed me of it, but now I shall covet my sanity in this insane place. My mind will remain ever my own. The door was unlocked. I gasped as she fumbled in. In her hands was a small bag filled with pills. The door shut behind her. She seemed tall, taller than I remembered, her arms thicker, more muscled. My heart raced. It beat loudly in my ears, and with each slow step this nurse took towards me, it seemed to beat louder and quicker. She threw the bag of medicine at me. "Take your meds." Each word was a cannon blast in my ears that subsided to a numb ringing. My eyes watered. I saw the nurse's disgusted face through blurred eyes. I remember her saying something spiteful, and then something snapped. I rushed her, knocking her to the floor, and, before I knew what I was doing, I'd sunken my teeth into her flesh. I must confess I had not focused as much on the details as I would have preferred, but I cannot describe what satisfaction came from her piggy squeals, nor, for that matter, what it's like to lose oneself completely in another's suffering. I was liberated, empowered. The confines of my cell were at last my domain, and I was myself again. I only came to my senses when I was dragged away from this nurse. There was time enough to savor the taste of her blood before I was drugged and a dark fog clouded my vision. 4th entry. Finally, I have been returned to my ward, and my journal has, at long last, been returned to me. It seemed a quaint gesture at first, but being apart from it for so long has proven its use as a therapeutic tool. I had to humiliate myself and beg to have it back. I felt like a dog doing tricks for treats. As I came into this place, my mind was sharp and my thoughts organized, though my actions may have contradicted the fact. But this place drives me further and further towards the barbarism of the man they perceived. Convinced that the medication is designed to make me slow, I've been refusing to take it, which, in itself, is challenging enough to occupy my mind. At first, I decided that there were 2 ways in which this could be accomplished: silent or blatant refusal. Having pondered it for no significant amount of time, I came to the conclusion that I was not the sort to sneak about, and that blatant refusal was more my cup of tea. I took large amounts of satisfaction at the sight of those strange nurses trying to pry my mouth open, and it was only under threat of lobotomy from the good doctor himself that I gave in. I feel the medication continuing to take its toll on me. There is now a tremble in my left hand that I am convinced was not there before, though every member of staff I've interrogated tells me my hands have trembled for as long as they've known me. Nothing but bullshit. Too many times now, I've caught myself laughing or weeping over nothing, giving rise to vast anger at this realization. It's not helped by the fact that my nurse has still not visited me, and after I was certain she would come when she heard of my recent misgivings. It was, I'll admit, something to focus on, her returning. Though certainly no God-fearing man, I can't help but feel that praying for her return would be the best thing to do. Well, it certainly seems to be the only thing left for me. Not one staff member has given me a decent response as to her whereabouts, and when asked to relay a message, they simply say, "She thinks it's cute you miss her." Needless to say, this pisses me off. But it's an anger I'm willing to swallow. I know that no hissy fit will bring her back, and, though it is equally true that good behavior will prove just as effective, anything conceived as bad behavior would only lead to further punishments. Perhaps, if she doesn't return soon, I will act out again. Oh, but that would be very petty of me indeed. 5th entry. There has been yet another space of time between this entry and the last. I've been moping, I'm told. The air in here grows stale, and I'm growing tired of my own company, and even more so of the constant interruptions. The good doctor keeps visiting me. Each time he looks over my journal and smiles. Every time my dose is increased, and has now gotten to the point that they've started making me ill. A few times when he's visited, he's been unable to read my journal, as I have only screamed and cried at him, clutching it to my chest like a baby. On the odd occasion the door was left open, and I ran. I only made it as far as the hall, but compared to the cramped cell I'd been living in, it felt so open. I felt like I could breathe. I stretched my arms out wide and cackled when I saw the wall was more than a few steps away. Of course, I was taken back to my cell, the good doctor smiling and taking me by the hand. I didn't want to go back, but there was something in his voice that I felt I couldn't disagree with, and I let him lead me. That night, I slumped into my bed, and with the memory of the hall, I happily went to sleep. 6th entry. At last, there is news from my nurse. I could barely contain myself on hearing, and even now I tremble with excitement. As it happens, my nurse was unnoticeably pregnant, which in and of itself came as rather a surprise, for she'd never cared to mention a lover to me. Though, through what unfortunate circumstance I was not informed. I learned that she lost her baby. She took a leave of absence for the sake of her health, understandably, and is now to return in a few days. Since she left, the days have blended into one, but now I have been promised her return, I feel every second cruise by. I am too excited to write any more today. It's been, otherwise, uneventful. 7th entry. For the first time and as far as I can remember, I feel remorse. A sickening combination of regret and sadness on another's behalf. Today, I did a very bad thing. Once again, I had to beg for my journal's return. This time, however, I feel its confiscation was justified. I have to sit still. Every moment causes my ribs to flare with pain. I've done a very bad thing. Once again, countless weeks have passed since I last wrote in this journal, and once again, I was left to think upon what I did. I had taken my pills that morning, and I can remember that in lieu of the usual heavy sadness that I had come to associate with my medication, I experienced overwhelming happiness, and I was set into uncontrollable fits of childish laughter. It was only when I remembered this feeling from the day I assaulted the piggish nurse that I recalled my earliest suspicions. I was stupid for letting them go unchecked, and weak for allowing the doctors to coerce me into taking them. Instantly, a combination of nervousness and stress raked my gut and twisted until I felt sick. I wrung myself ragged at that point, pacing my ward for hours, feeling a constant blend of worry and excitement, followed by the irrational, euphoric laughter. I didn't want to hurt my nurse, yet with every dragging second, I could feel my hold over my own actions slipping as another fought for control. I knew she would be here soon, and once again my heart beat loudly in my ears as I sat and waited for her. At last, voices approached my door, and it was as if time had stiffened. There came footsteps that echoed like steady cannon fire, and a morbid rattling of chains that cut through my skull as the key was turned and clunked in its lock. Though I know that, in reality, the door was flung open and my nurse burst into the room expecting me to welcome her. In my eyes, I saw the door slowly creak open and my nurse stalk into the room. There was a pulsing sensation behind my eyes, and it was as if somebody rapidly flicked the lights on and off. One moment I saw my nurse and the room was as white and glaring as ever, and the next I saw some haggard crone bent over and extending a gnarled claw of a hand towards me. The flashes began to pulse quicker. I could not discern reality from hallucination. I bit down upon my lips, and blood flowed freely into my mouth. I looked up to see the gnarled talon above me, and I cried out. The crone's arms enshrouded me, and I allowed the straight-thinking part of my brain to slip, and my body to lash out wildly. I recall my fist catching her jaw with some force, knocking her to the ground. In my intoxicated state, I leaped on top of her like some savage, and I began to cause her as much harm as I could. It wasn't like the last time, where I'd only sunken my teeth into flesh. This time I hammered blows upon her jaw until it cracked, and clawed at her face until it shred. I ripped her hair from her scalp, and I tried to gouge her eyes from her head. Still, reality and hallucination were blurred into one indiscernible mess, and incredible waves of euphoria clenched at my guts. The blood on my hands recalled memories of when I was a free man, and the sheer sense of once again living awoke me to how dead my life had become. I felt no shame as the guards ripped me off her, only a numb satisfaction as their boots broke my ribs. For punishment, there was nothing they could do save for confiscate my journal, and once again confine me to solitary. It was the good doctor himself who returned my journal to me, though I was certain they would deem it unwise to give me anything as pointy as a pencil. It would be an exaggeration to say that the guards received harsher punishments than I did, as expected, with no family to sue them and having no real connection to the outside world. It's a wonder that I'm not forgotten. They now accompany every nurse that enters my room, and the cocky arrogance they now carry is one that is impossible to miss. From time to time, I see minors walking the halls. Her face now artistically scarred, though she doesn't visit me anymore. She refuses to even look at my door. Each time she passes, however, I find myself crying, and I whisper, "Sorry," softly as she passes. It's not enough, I know, but it's the only thing I can do. 8th entry. After that incident, the routine turned to normal, as it always does. The staff continue to try to take my journal to read. However, I've decided to be difficult and now place it instead in a hole in the mattress I managed to make by prying open a smaller hole worn in by use. I then flip the mattress over so as to cover my hiding place. Its disappearance has them stumped. The mattress would be an obvious hiding place, but the condition of my ribs removes it from all logical thoughts. Successfully hiding it is a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. The guards now randomly search my room, hoping to catch me writing, though I am able to easily work around their thick-headed tactics. At one point, it began to frustrate them, and upon my daring request for a new pencil, they damaged my ribs still further. Again, they receive little to no punishment. Even as I write, my ribs flare, and my breathing is harsh. No doctor has been sent for me. Perhaps they don't realize my condition, but I will not allow them to see it. I will not give them the satisfaction of knowing they have physically broken me. For as long as I hide my pain, the satisfaction is mine. I am in control of how they perceive me, and in that control, I'll take my freedom. My chest grows tight. It's hurt since they first broke my ribs, and the act of breathing, that at one point in time was easy, is now a great effort. My hand, that was once steady, has dimmed and weakened, causing my writing to fade from its usual scribbles to barely legible lines. I am tired. I don't remember how long I've been here, and that makes me feel so incredibly small. As to whether or not this is a testament of my weakness or a sign of their strength, I'm unsure. Either way, they've succeeded. My body is ruined, and even now I am still coughing blood. The only thing in this place that I came close to loving, I was forced to destroy. Perhaps then, this will be my last entry. I would return this book to its hiding place, but I'm afraid the effort of moving the mattress is beyond me. As I sit here, my vision fades, and my breath grows short. With blood running from my lips and staining my clothes, I feel it would be best if I just went to sleep. Well, that was a really creepy case study into the effects of incarceration. Hope you enjoyed that one as much as I did, narrating it for you. Looking forward to your thoughts, feelings, and comments. So don't be shy. Leave a comment below the vid, and I will do my very best, as always, to get back to you. Okay, quick update. Everyone's asking about Dead Man Running. When is it going to continue? Is it going to continue? Well, yes, it is. But Bo Whiskey is in the process of rewriting parts 4 and 5 to make it even better for you. So you're just going to have to wait a little bit. What have I got lined up? A few other things. Festival of Snow will come back for part 4. Lots of things in the pipeline, but things are changing a little bit. So I'll do my best to try and make sure that the great stories keep coming each and every week. A lot of you like the Campfire collaboration, so Volume 2 will be coming up sometime soon as well. Oh, well, it's the weekend. I've had enough. I need a couple of days off, but I will be back again on Monday. Until then, sweet dreams and bye-bye. Thank you so much for choosing to spend your time listening to me. Now, if you enjoyed the Dr. Creepen experience, then come find me on Facebook. Come chat with me on Twitter. Listen to the background music and download it if you like on SoundCloud. Drop by the store, pick up a t-shirt. And, importantly, if you've got a story you'd like me to read, send it to Dr. Creepen's Vault, the subreddit I set up so that I could read your stories. Now, looking forward to seeing you all again real soon. So, come check me out, okay?